Hello and welcome to Focus here on France 24. Now, it was an issue that once left his party in tatters and still raises hackles across the British political spectrum. The European Union and Britain's part in it is a thorny question that dogs David Cameron and has haunted his Conservative Party for 4 decades. The British leader was due to give an important speech in the Netherlands on that very subject last Friday before the Algerian hostage crisis took his attention elsewhere. We'll find out later this Monday when he will deliver the address instead. But in the meantime, there's speculation that he'll pave the way for a possible referendum on whether or not Britain should stay in the EU at all. But the prospect of the country going it alone doesn't please everyone, as Alex Bale and Yong Shim have been finding out.
It's something Liz has put in the pockets of many of her clients.
It's great, it's looking really good.
A marketing tool which folds into the size of a business card. In addition to her 30 employees in London, she has more than 10 distributors across Europe. Frank, for example, is her Norwegian sales partner. And as such, it's in Liz's interests to defend the UK's membership of the European Union.
If the UK were to leave the EU, that would have a hugely detrimental effect upon our business. We've predicated our entire business plan on having an easy-to-access block of countries close by, and in fact 70% of our business is export into the European community. Having Europe literally on our doorstep is absolutely vital for us.
But in Britain, not everyone has taken warmly to Liz's point of view. 59% of people are calling for a referendum, and Prime Minister David Cameron will soon give a speech on the issue. In the city, Kevin's business underwrites cargo insurance for freights from all over the world, a financial product which he says is difficult to export within the EU.
The European Union was supposed to be some sort of free trade area. However, we find it more difficult to do business in continental Europe. It would be easier for London to work outside the regulation or control of the European Union.
It's a Eurosceptic message which Nigel Farage of the UK Independence Party has said many times before on television. According to polls ahead of the EU's 2014 elections, his party is now ahead of the Conservatives, which is why he believes Cameron's under pressure to speak on the EU.
He's responding to the rise of UKIP in the opinion polls. Secondly, and related to that, he's responding to growing disquiet on his own backbenchers and his own party across the country. Very often in life, when you try to please everybody, you finish up pleasing nobody.
It's a gloomy outlook for Cameron, which isn't made any easier by his coalition with the Liberal Democrats.
In order to safeguard British jobs and the British economy and our place in the world, we need to be an active and positive member of the European Union. And I think that's one of the reasons David Cameron needs to impose a bit of discipline on his own party and actually come clean about his positive view of the European Union.
On this contentious issue, numbers can speak louder than words. In May 2012, 51% of British voters wanted out of the EU. Now that figure stands at just 42%.
Well, for more now on that issue of Europe, let's talk to our correspondent in London, Bénédicte Pavio, who joins us now. Bénédicte, that speech didn't go ahead on Friday in the end, but we did see excerpts from what Mr Cameron was planning to say, and it looked like he was hinting at a possible so-called in-out referendum on Europe, didn't it?
Yes, it did, in this long-awaited speech, the one that we've been waiting for 6 months, this key speech, and the one that we hope to find out more about today, since we gather that Mr Cameron will finally make this speech now in the coming days. So, yes, it does look like there will be possibly an announcement of an in-out referendum with a clear option of the UK exiting the EU. And, of course, if indeed that in-out referendum went ahead, and in the event of a no vote, then the UK would leave the EU. But we're not there yet, far from it. So it looks like David Cameron will actually talk about a new pared-down role for Britain, one which he says will claw back powers from Brussels. And we did get excerpts, you're quite right, from the speech that he hasn't pronounced yet, where he talks about a growing gap between Brussels, between the EU and its citizens, and one really of a lack of democratic accountability and consent. And that is really his frustration, Britain's frustration. And he warns that if the EU doesn't address these challenges, and if Britain doesn't play that important role to help it address those challenges, then people will drift out of, Europe will fail and Britain will just drift out of the EU.
So a growing tone of Euroscepticism then perhaps from that speech. But Mr Cameron is of course governing in a coalition with the Liberal Democrat Party. What do they think about this, and has it caused splits within that coalition?
Well, yes to splits, yes to divisions, and yes, you're quite right. He is a Conservative leader, but he didn't get enough votes to win. He didn't win outright, so he had to he chose to have a marriage of convenience, and that marriage of convenience is with the Liberal Democrats. So he has a Deputy Prime Minister called Nick Clegg, who is the head of the Liberal Democrats, who is very pro-European, as indeed the Liberal Democrats are, who knows the EU institutions very well, since he himself worked at the European Commission and also in the European Parliament. Indeed, was an MEP from, I think it was 1999 to 2004, before deciding to focus on domestic politics. So a lot of divisions, a lot of criticism, both from within his own party, but also from the Liberal Democrats, saying you're causing uncertainty with this talk of leaving Europe. You're really worrying business, both here, it's going to cost us jobs, and also you're worrying potential foreign investors.
Now, what about the British people? If this does go to a vote, do we have any indication of which way they might go if it ever came to a referendum?
Well, one of the latest polls that I have before me is a YouGov poll. Actually, the figures have become better and the split has narrowed. The latest poll is 42% of people say they would vote to leave the EU, 36% would vote to stay, and the rest are either unsure, that's 17%, or wouldn't vote at all, that's 4%. You may think that that's bad because, of course, we've still got a majority here of 42% saying that they would vote to leave. But actually, a year ago, that was 51%. But let me come back on something. If he does announce an in-out referendum, David Cameron, we think he'll say very much that it will be after 2015. Why 2015? Because this government has been elected for a fixed term. That's when the next elections are scheduled. And we think Mr Cameron will promise a referendum after 2015, possibly 2018, for example. But that's a big if. That's if he wins the next election. And according to the polls, he may not do that.
OK, now, and just finally to finish, this issue of Europe is one with a great deal of history for Mr Cameron and his party, isn't it?
It is indeed. I mean, there were problems already within the Conservative Party under Margaret Thatcher. There were problems then under John Major, another Conservative Prime Minister. So it's one that's been haunting, dogging the Tory party for a very, very long time. And of course, there's also another pressure, that of business and business leaders who are really petitioning Mr Cameron to really stop this uncertainty and to stop talking about ever leaving the EU.
OK, Bénédicte Pavio in London, thank you very much indeed for joining us. And that's all for this edition of Focus, but do join us again at the same time tomorrow for more. And do stay tuned to France 24.